I get a lot of questions from undergrads as to whether it's worth doing the CFA Charter whilst you're still at university. So in this video, I'm going to break down the pros and cons of doing so and whether it's right for you. So let's go. If you're new here, I'm Harris, an investment banker and CFA Charter holder who studied at Imperial College London. Now, I didn't actually start the CFA whilst I was at university, but assuming you do, let's look at the entry requirements and what you can actually do as an undergrad. So the CFA Charter is not fully accessible to undergrads, and the reason for that is you can only start it in the final year of your studies, which means that more than likely you can only complete the first level and maybe start the second level. The chances of you completing level 2 before you graduate is very slim because level 2 is an absolute beast, so the amount of time required is almost impossible to balance with your university studies. Also, you can't actually complete the CFA and become a charter holder until you have 4 years of relevant work experience, which means that it's some time after your university degree before you actually complete the journey. So passing level 1 early does not immediately certify you as a CFA charter holder. So why would you consider doing it? Let's discuss that. So the question here is more specifically, how useful is CFA level 1 when you're applying for graduate schemes and entry-level jobs post-university? Well, if you want to work in finance, which I assume you do given you're considering CFA charter, I would actually say compared to some other use cases of your time, the CFA charter and specifically CFA level 1 is probably not as useful as you might think it is. And the reason for that is at this stage, there's more emphasis placed on internships, networking, and demonstrating the core skills and technical skills required to excel in these roles. The CFA charter is typically something you do in the early to mid stage of your career alongside your work to supplement and enhance your skills and facilitate certain moves. And as you rise up to more senior roles within asset or portfolio management or equity research, having the CFA charter often becomes a prerequisite. But for investment banking or consulting roles, particularly early on, the CFA charter is not a big hiring factor. So if you're considering doing CFA level 1 at university, it's more about signaling interest than it is a golden ticket to getting the job. Now, having said that, there are some upsides to doing it early, so let's discuss them. The first one is breadth of knowledge. Now, the CFA charter is more of a generalist designation than a specialist designation, and there's probably no other finance qualification out there that gives you the sort of breadth that the CFA charter does. It's definitely its competitive advantage. And even if you're studying a finance related degree, there's definitely going to be content that you haven't seen before, even at level 1, and that's going to be useful for all types of finance roles. And once you've done level 1, you'll be more fluent in the language of finance, which will help when it comes to interviewing. And also, people argue that don't worry about doing a qualification, you'll learn everything you need on the desk in the job. And there is some truth in that, but the reality is that self-teaching and hoping for natural exposure to everything you need to know is hard because you don't know what you don't know. The CFA curriculum forces you to cover key finance concepts systematically, and hirers know this, and they take comfort from the fact that you've already encountered these concepts. So for example, if you're applying for a role in equity, they know that you already know what free cash flow to the firm is, what DCF is, what beta is. They don't need to teach you, so they can take a punt on you. And also, if you're doing a weaker degree or at a weaker university, the CFA charter can help fill in those knowledge gaps. The second upside is signaling your intent, and this relates to the fact that early in your career, it's all about standing out. The world of finance is super competitive, and there's top students from all around the world competing for a limited number of roles. So how are you going to signal your intent? Well, there's multiple ways to do this, and the traditional ones are through university societies, internships, and networking, which we've already mentioned and we'll discuss again shortly. But doing CFA level 1 alongside your undergrad is a major signal of intent. It signals that you're serious about finance, that you're committed and disciplined, and essentially you're going all in. Now, I'm not saying this is the correct signaling, and we'll talk more about this shortly, but if you do strike the right balance, it can't hurt your chances. The third upside is doing the CFA earlier in your life is easier. Now, you might feel like you're busy right now, but trust me, you're not. You have more time at your disposal than you'll ever have again, or at least until retirement. Once you start working and get married, have kids, and try and balance hobbies, you'll realize you don't have any more spare time. And generally speaking, spending your 20s developing yourself is a good use of that time. Now, there is a balance to be struck, and we'll mention that later in the video, but if the CFA is the way you choose to do that, that can't hurt your chances. Also, younger brains absorb and digest information faster, and you're already in exam mode if you're still at university, so overlaying CFA content might be quite efficient. Okay, so that's the upsides, but what are the downsides of starting the CFA charter whilst you're still at university? Well, I'll touch on them shortly, but before I do, if you are going to do the CFA charter, you need to master the calculator because the exams are highly time pressured, but many people don't know where to start, so I've created a free guide. The link is in the description. Okay, let's look at the downsides, and the first is the risk of conflicting with your degree. CFA level 1 takes on average 300 plus hours, which is a major time drain. And if this hurts your university grades, i.e. you don't get that 2-1 in the UK or a high GPA in the US, that's going to hurt your chances of landing the finance role that you're after. Employers really care about your academic performance, so it's important that you prioritize that. But assuming you're on top of your studies and you have spare time, what should you do with it? Well, the answer is focus on landing an internship and networking. Most banks, consulting firms, and funds want students to have done internships, so the truth is, from second year onwards or third year, if you're doing a master's degree, you need to start positioning yourself for this. CFA level 1 simply isn't a replacement for this, so although there are circumstances in which you might want to do CFA level 1 whilst you're still at university, I think generally speaking, your time is better spent attending career fairs and building connections. The other thing is, are you really sure that you want to work in finance? Many people think they want to work in finance, but this is not actually how it unfolds. The great thing about university is that whatever you study, you can usually pivot to work in something totally unrelated because the focus in university is on building transferable skills. In contrast, the CFA charter is a lot more niche and specific and is only really worth your time if you're 100% sure you're going to work in finance. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a long lag between doing CFA level 1 as an undergrad and when you can actually become a CFA charter holder, which is typically 4+ years. And a lot can change in this time. Now, you can argue that having level 1 content under your belt is useful no matter what, and I actually do agree with that. But broadly speaking, the question is, are you actually going to apply it? In my opinion, a lot of the value associated with doing the CFA, and specifically CFA level 1, is the knowledge you build and the application of that knowledge, not just putting CFA level 1 on your CV. And the fourth and final point here is, what are you giving up instead? As I mentioned earlier, internships and relationships are an important part of breaking into finance, and your social life, extracurriculars, sports, etc. are an important way of unlocking these. But if you're studying the CFA charter alongside your university degree, it's very unlikely that you have time for these, so you need to weigh that out. Also, your working life is long, especially in finance, so once you get going, it's very difficult to slow that down. This is kind of the last phase of your life of true freedom, and you're already focusing on trying to pass your university exams. Do you also need the headache of CFA level 1 on top? Now, there's always an argument for getting ahead, and overall I agree with that, but generally speaking, there are certain moments in life that you don't get back, and university is one of them, so I'd say enjoy it. Now, it's worth knowing that more than 50% of people fail their CFA exams because they don't have the right strategy, they're not efficient learners, and they don't have anyone to turn to for help. And in the process, they waste hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars on research. So if you want to avoid this and pass your CFA exams first time without sacrificing your entire life, I have something perfect for you. Check out the first link in the description. Now let's discuss a few alternative ways to stand out. And the first one that I've mentioned a few times now is internships, and simply put, these are way more effective at landing you a job than the CFA charter. Now, I didn't do an internship at university, but in hindsight, I wish I did. Now, the truth is I came from a background where the importance of internships wasn't necessarily highlighted to me, so I was a bit slow out the blocks, but if I could go back, I'd definitely do one. The second one is networking and coffee chats, and the truth is that the CFA charter does not replace the relationships you can build in the industry. Genuinely, these relationships unlock doors, and if I have any regrets throughout university and even after university, it's that I didn't spend more time cultivating my relationships and network in a very natural way. Networking is one of those things that you have to actually prioritize. You have to put an active effort in to provide people value and to follow up with them and so on and so forth. So it is a time commitment, but a worthy one. The next one is technical skills such as financial modeling, Excel, coding for finance, and so on. And I actually think this is a really good use of your time at university. It's much more useful day to day on the desk. You'll use it immediately, and even before that, it will help a lot with the interview process. Finally, stock or investment pitches are a great way to demonstrate your investment knowledge. These really do help you stand out, and it's more about articulating how you think than the actual investment recommendation being a good one. So I think the bottom line is that although the CFA is an excellent way of standing out in general, I don't think it's necessarily the best way to stand out as an undergrad. So let's conclude with whether you should consider doing the CFA charter while still at university. So doing CFA level 1 might make sense if you're at a weak university or doing an unrelated degree and you feel like you need to catch up with your peers. Also, if you want to work in asset management, equity research, or portfolio management and your heart is set on these, again, you might want to consider getting started. started. And finally, if you have time to study for the CFA Charter without hurting your degree and you've already landed an internship or you don't need one, then again, you can consider doing the CFA Charter. However, you should probably skip it for now if you're applying for IB or consulting roles, because for them, internships matter much more. Also, if you're unsure about a career in finance or you want to maintain flexibility, I wouldn't recommend you start with the CFA just yet. And also, if you don't want to sacrifice your university grades, networking, or social life, again, CFA Charter whilst you're still at uni is probably not a good idea. Finally, to wrap that up, I think at this stage, experience over certification. So if you're considering doing the CFA Charter as a student, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And otherwise, if you like this video, then you're going to love these two on screen. And thanks for your time, and see you in the next video.